It's a wonderful day in the homiehood, a wonderful day for a homie. Won't you be my homie to Taro? Today is Thursday, March 9th, and we are going to dig into the news. We got lots to talk about today. Thank you for joining us. We run through these headlines every weekday morning, and I give my own hot takes. That's why it's called Headlines and Hot Takes. It's a Canadian spin, which is why our first story is Roll Up to Win. Technical error incorrectly tells Tim Hortons customers they'd won $10,000. So this is a story that tells us about two people who both rolled up the rolled up the rim, and I guess these days like you have to like scan it. I don't know. I don't drink Tim Hortons, but I do drink my own homebrew, which I think is much better than Tim Hortons. Although they can't disappoint me in this way. One person who won, or sorry, didn't win, says that it kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth, so to speak. Glitch or not, it shows that I won and I'd like them to honor it. And I totally agree. Tim Hortons, if you're going to tell people that they won the $10,000, you can't just be like, nah, sorry, you didn't actually win. And you know what they offered people who won the $10,000? A $50 gift card to Tim Hortons. Like not even $50, but a $50 gift card that Tim Hortons is going to get back in lieu of $10,000. So of course in these stories there's at least two people who experienced this glitch, and as soon as they won, they kind of celebrate and they tell all their coworkers and they call their partner. And in one case, like someone was making plans to go visit their family out west with their children and like and all of these things. And it says here, I just remember feeling so on this emotional high and then just like crashing essentially. She said, one of the fake winners here. So really sad, and I do hope that Tim Hortons is able to compensate these people with the full amount. Give them the $10,000. Tim Hortons, you're making enough money. You need to cover your own butts on this one. You made a mistake, a technical error, sure, but it's your technical error and you have to make it right. All right. A new study found that COVID 19 didn't have a big impact on the mental health of most people. Now, this is a great story in so much as it informs us about the assumptions that we make, assumptions that can have the potential to become mainstream narratives. Like everybody told us that, oh my God, mental health during the pandemic, mental health is going to be so bad. We need to open up schools and open up bars and restaurants because mental health all the time. And then we found out now that, like, oh, actually, our mental health wasn't as bad as we thought. So early on in the pandemic, predictions were grim. Scientific papers warned of a mental health tsunami. Experts worried about escalating anxiety and depression. Um, but a study has found that there is not panic, but resilience. So in the wake of this, actually, they found that people kind of became more resilient. And I think there's a lot to be said here because in our day-to-day normal lives, there are already a lot of mental health issues that we face. And personally, I can remember like at the beginning of the pandemic, like it was kind of fun, and it was like thinking back to it now, like the pandemic no longer, it just seems like it's gone on and on and on, but thinking back to how it was like fun, it was new, it was like we were doing new things, new ways to connect with each other, like new ways to exercise out on the street with your neighbors, new ways to like go for walks with people, and it felt like this thing like, oh, we're banding together in order to fight this thing that is plaguing us all, literally. And we don't have that kind of same sense as unity anymore. We're basically back to like normal times, which, as we know, normal times not really good for our mental health either. So this study is saying that there was no evidence of an overall spike in depression and anxiety among teenagers, at least in the first peak pandemic year. Yeah, that was one of the big things too, is like, think of the children, think of the children's mental health. They need to be in school. You think being in school is good for the mental health of children? A lot of kids face a lot of mental health problems as a result of being in school, and nobody ever worries about those kids now that they're back, do they? So there was a drumbeat that everyone was having a mental health problem, says Brett Toombs, the professor of the Faculty of Medicine at McGill University and the chair of the Canadian Task Force on Preventative Care. Oh my goodness, what a mouthful. The data doesn't show that. It is really a cautionary note that evidence is important. However, this report does say that one trouble spot was women whose symptoms of anxiety and depression increased, although only by small amounts. So Daniel Rice, the clinical psychologist and research at St. Joseph's Healthcare Hamilton, was one of the authors of this study, and they're pointing out here that like, hey, policymakers need to do more in these emergency situations, because you know who they impact the most? Women, because they tend to be the ones to have to leave their job to provide childcare for their families, and they have additional pressures that, surprise, surprise, men do not face. Like highlighting here, working mothers, especially during a crisis, we need to support them. So Antifer in chat is saying, imagine missing out on high school. I would have wanted that. Literally every kid in school. You know what happens when there's a snow day? Kids celebrate. It's basically like taking a mental health day for yourself. You know, every kid in their mind wants that. It was so hilarious, kind of like looking back and being like, we need to think of the children who are not in school. Children love being not in school, okay? So yeah, resilience shouldn't be an unexpected finding. A long history of pandemics, disasters, and war shows that people usually pull together, adapt, and recover. Suicide rates have also been found to hold steady, which I don't know if that's. It'd be nice if they and even fall. Actually, it says here during a collective crisis, because like maybe it's just like, as I said, like suddenly you have something to like put your collective effort in. Like in a way, it's like a unifying force. We can even think of people on the far right of the political spectrum who found a community during this time. You know, maybe for the first time in their lives. So it made a logical sense for big trauma. Wait. Oh, for a big trauma. Sorry, I was reading that like it was big pharma, but it's not. It's big trauma. It made a lot logical sense for a big trauma to impact society's mood in negative ways, says Dr. Rice. The study is a caution against jumping to negative conclusions before the evidence is clear. Predicting the population will do poorly, she points out, doesn't inspire perseverance. So, I mean, I think that's a great thing to keep in mind too, when we're always like, global warming, the world is ending, we're so screwed, like immigrants from global warming, it's gonna cause political unrest. It's like, okay, well, why don't we stop like fear mongering and actually, you know, band together and do something about this, take action, you know? Anyways, moving on, Bill C-11 approaches finish line as YouTube Tory MPs express anger over rejection of key amendment. Now, it is kind of funny here. A lot of liberals are just pointing out that like, oh, wow, the conservatives are like the defenders of big tech, which is kind of like a conspiracy theory language that like big tech is controlling us through our government. And here the government is pushing back against big tech, or at least seeming to do so, and conservatives are pushing back against that. So the conservatives accuse the federal government of trying to regulate videos that average Canadians post online, including your Aunt Betty's cat video, after it rejected a Senate amendment taking user-generated content on platforms such as YouTube beyond the scope of Bill C-11. Now, Bill C-11 is the Streaming Act that would update Canada's broadcast laws to cover streaming platforms including Netflix, Amazon Prime, and YouTube. Under the new rules, those platforms would have to promote and support Canadian creative work, including songs, TV programs, and films. Now, Heritage Minister Pablo Rodriguez, who is a Liberal, told the Globe and Mail that Canada's cultural sector wants the bill to pass as soon as possible and urged the Tories. If you don't know, Tories are conservatives. My partner asked me the other day, and I had to clarify. So urged the Tories, the conservatives, not to further slow down its progress as it approaches the finish line. Now, conservative MPs have a choice. Will they continue repeating tech giants' talking points and try to kill the bill, or will they finally stand up for Canadian artists and Canadian culture? Now, a lot of people don't really know what's going on with this bill. Honestly, it's quite hard to find out information about it, because there's what it says and there's what it will be in practice, and people don't really know what it's going to be like in practice. And the thing that gets me is that, like, oh, YouTube thinks it's bad, and so maybe it's good. Because I don't trust these big corporations, and that's coming from like a YouTuber. However, I focus on Canadian content, so if this is something that's YouTube is going to have to push Canadian content to Canadians, I might be one of those niche YouTubers who actually benefits from something like this. So the government on Tuesday accepted 18 of the Senate's 26 amendments to the online streaming bill, but rejected a key Senate change designed to clarify that the bill would not lead to the regulation of user-generated content, such as amateur videos on platforms such as YouTube. So this is actually one of the main concerns that was raised about Bill C-11, is that it would affect people like myself who create user-generated content. And they, for some reason, they rejected that key Senate change that was really just asking for clarification that that wouldn't be the case. So some people are speculating, including some of the conservative critics here. Conservative heritage critic Rachel Thomas said C-11 was a terrible piece of legislation that would give the government control over our search bars. And she also goes on to say that this is very telling that that key amendment was not included. The bill will ask platforms to promote Canadian content, including songs and films, so they are visible to Canadians choosing what to watch or listen to. Ms. Thomas said influencing what Canadians see rather than presenting them with options based on their own tastes was a form of censorship. Now, I don't know if I fully agree with that. Like, that if this was a form of censorship, then the algorithm as it already exists would be a form of censorship. So I really don't know. I don't think the average MP is probably even qualified to comment on something like that. The Bank of Canada is holding its key rate steady at 4.5%. This basically applies if you pay a mortgage or your landlord pays a mortgage. This means this is coming after a long time of interest rate growth, basically a record interest rate growth. The main takeaway here is that this pausing of the rate hikes is just a pause and a conditional pause. They might get back to raising it again, and it's also going against what they're doing in the United States, where the federal monetary thing in the US or whatever has said that they are planning for several more rounds of rate hikes. So Canada, the Bank of Canada, is kind of the first of major nations who have taken this route to try to combat inflation, to say, hey, we're going to pause this monetary policy and hope that we've done enough. However, if we haven't done enough, we are going to continue escalating rate hikes to try to combat inflation. Now, I read one opinion article which I think I agree with, that they need to do more than just rate hikes when they're trying to combat inflation, because it's operating on the assumption that the reason inflation is happening is because the wages that people are getting paid are increasing, and that's really just not true. They are increasing, but just a little bit. And the reason we're seeing this inflation is not because we, the workforce, are getting paid more. It's actually just because of the war in Ukraine, supply chain issues with China, the pandemic, all of those compounding reasons. COVID zero attempts in China affecting the supply chain and all that. So they're taking this traditional approach to a novel problem, and that's why we gonna probably see more rate hikes after this conditional pause. Probably is my guess, but hey, don't take financial advice here on my channel. That's not my style. Ontario will be short 33,000 nurses and personal support workers by 2028, a report says. So obviously this is something that's really concerning. We're already experiencing like a nursing shortage and a PSW shortage, but by 2028 the problem might be really, really bad. So the Ontario government needs to spend 21.3 billion more on healthcare to meet its own expansion targets, and will be short about 33,000 nurses and personal support workers by 2027-28, says a new report from the province's fiscal watchdog. Now, of course, this is good that this report is coming out now, because hopefully the DOFO conservative government will be able to avoid a situation like this. Am I confident that they will? Not particularly, but again, this is why it's important to have these reports, so we know how badly they're screwing us all over. Um, Late last month, the federal government struck a $46.2 billion 10-year health agreement with the provinces. Of course, this is just some background information here, stuff we've covered on this channel, that fell far short of their demands for an annual $28 billion increase in federal funding. Ottawa also announced $25 billion for bilateral agreements, which Ontario is set to receive $8.4 billion over 10 years. So the basic gist of this is that the federal government is transferring a lot of funds, more funds than they usually transfer, but it's not going to be something that will successfully transform our healthcare system, and it's not really something that will necessarily fix our healthcare crisis. So it does still fall on the provinces to step up and increase their funding. And how do they do that? Well, we don't really know. Financial Accountability Officer Peter Weltman estimates that Premier Doug Ford's government has allocated $21.3 billion less than needed to fund current healthcare programs and expansion plans in hospitals, home care, and long-term care, and will need to dip into contingency funds or new federal healthcare transfers to fulfill its commitments. Well, okay, so there's potentially how dipping into contingency funds or finding new ways to make money. Essentially, the funding shortfall is only part of the story. The more pressing issue, I think, is that Ontario is currently experiencing shortages of nurses and personal support workers, which are projected to persist throughout our 6-year forecast, Mr. Weltman told reporters at Queen's Park. So yeah, there's a lot of kind of numbers here being run through. But Premier Doug Ford said on Wednesday that the FAO being the Financial Accountability Office, report was only a snapshot. The FAO, they take their snapshot in time. They don't include the health transfers, and they aren't including any additional money that's going forward, Mr. Ford said at an unrelated announcement in Pickering, Ontario. So yeah, we're throwing everything in the kitchen sink at healthcare. This is the reason we've got to get caught up on backlogged surgeries. This is the reason that we need community surgical clinics. So basically, in a nutshell, he's saying, hey, we're doing everything we can. We're commercializing, we're privatizing our healthcare system as fast as we can, folks. But we know that unfortunately this is not going to be something that solves the labor crisis that we're having. Actually, this is something that's going to make it worse, because suddenly all those nurses, PSWs in the private sector, if they have opportunities in the private sector, public and private, they're going to be pulled away from the public sector and moved to the potentially higher paying private sector, and we as taxpayers also have to pay more money in order to fund those private sector initiatives. So yeah, we need to do something here. Ontario NDP leader Marit Stiles called the report devastating and said Mr. Ford's government should repeal its wage cap legislation. I think this government has manufactured a crisis, is putting people at risk because their ultimate plan is to privatize our healthcare system, she said. So, harsh words from Marit Stiles. However, I did see a poll the other day. It's just a poll, so nothing to take too seriously, that showed that the NDP is down in the polls in Ontario. I don't know how. And the Liberals are up and the Conservatives are holding steady, and it's really just like, how does this even happen? Liberals don't even have a leader here, and Marit Stiles is like not the greatest, but they at least have a leader, and Doug Ford is horrible. So how does this happen? I don't know. Ontario, if you could please help me and help ourselves get our ish together, then that would be fantastic. So lastly for today, I wanted to touch on the on the Chinese meddling situation, to which everyone has a various degree of how serious this is. I wanted to actually go over like 2 opinion articles just to kind of give us a more well-rounded idea of like what is kind of going on here. So these are 2 opinion articles, again, not news articles, so just be aware of that. Trudeau can survive Chinese meddling uproar, but economic harms for Canada could be deep. Now this is saying that, is this going to be something where Trudeau gets moved off of his top spot, where he's going to maybe let somebody else run as leader of the Liberals to be prime minister? Probably not. He's probably going to hold strong there. This person does not think that it's going to affect him to that degree. However, they want to highlight that, the real damage that this brings is to the Canada-China relationship. It doesn't really matter if our Liberal Party and Conservative Party are not getting along. But what's really important? If China and Canada are getting along. And this would be something that would be really, well, it already is really bad because, of course, there are so many economic consequences that we will face. It's saying here that the economic giant, China, is our second largest single country trading partner. I assume the first it would be the United States. So also highlighting here that it would be only devastating if the Liberals would be found if it actually collaborated with Chinese operatives in their efforts to help Liberals win certain ridings. Something that, on its face is completely far-fetched, because this is also this timeline would have also been during a time when relations between China and Canada were like at all-time worst. Recall that in December 2018, China locked up Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig in response to Ottawa's apprehending Huawei business executive Meng Huanshu at the behest of Washington. It sparked outrage. Relations with China went into a deep freeze that remained that way through the elections of 2019 and 2021, when it is alleged the Chinese interference occurred. So to think that somehow Trudeau, at the time when he was worried about the Michaels and everyone was talking about the Michaels, and we were holding our own political prisoner Meng Wanzhou kind of hostage at the behest of Washington and the US, to think that they were also collaborating at that time to have a conspiracy where China is making sure that Trudeau can win. It is like absolutely kind of preposterous, but at the same time, who knows? It's certainly possible. It would just be like, wow, that would be like really far-fetched, right? So this person is also highlighting that like Pierre Trudeau was one of the first countries to diplomatically recognize China under Pierre Trudeau, Canada, and did so ahead of Richard Nixon. Justin Trudeau also said that he wants his children to continue this, which kind of is like, well, bro, hold on. Your children aren't going to be prime minister yet, but I guess, if anything is possible in Canada. It already is a political dynasty, so I guess the future Trudeaus, hopefully they can make relationships better with China as well. Jean Chrétien was a big China booster, saying here. On the conservative side, Brian Mulroney forged good relations, and Stephen Harper also reached out to China later in his stewardship. So the ironic part about all of this is that despite efforts to have a good relationship with China, we don't have a good relationship with China, which is bad for us here in Canada economically. And also this is just like, hey, oh my God, I can't believe Trudeau is an ally with China, is basically the conservative line here, and everything like China bad, Trudeau bad, they're in bed together. But the actual political reality is they are not in bed together. They have made tensions a lot worse between the two countries. The relationship has deteriorated to the point where it's like barely recognizable. You can remember the Trudeau Xi exchange in the whatever recently, the awkward handshake and all that. So it's just like, this relationship with Canada and China is only going to get worse, especially now that Trudeau has issued 2 probes into seeing if there is election, if China did influence the Canadian elections, which they probably did, but to like a very degree. And is it something that we need to be worrying about to this degree? Probably not. And the unintended consequence of all this is that Canada and China are going to have a worse off relationship. I would like to see those relationships be repaired, but I don't think we're going to see that, not under Trudeau, and definitely not under Pierre Poilievre, heaven forbid. So there was one more article, another opinion piece on China, but we're going to have to get to that after this segment ends. Thank you so much for tuning in to My Homie Tutaro. If you are in the comments, please put in some timestamps for the story that you liked and answer my question. What is your favorite bird? What is your favorite bird? If you could tell us in the comments, that would be fantastic. The YouTube comments, if you're here in Twitch, you can tell us live in chat. And we'll see you tomorrow because we go live with the news every weekday morning.